Hello. Hello, police. Yeah, what's the problem, sir? We just drove down our farm track. Yeah. Go and feed our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it. Yeah. It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. The final piece of the puzzle regarding a potential second Range Rover comes from a man named Raymond Wright. And if you needed any further convincing regarding the possibility of a second Range Rover being involved in this crime, particularly that of a green Range Rover, just listen to the following eyewitness account. On Wednesday the 6th of December 1995, myself and my wife had attended a funeral, and as such we left our young son at my mother's house in Pitsea. The funeral we attended was in Reigate, and I had to drop my wife and mother-in-law off in Hornchurch. After this, I carried on to Pitsea, where I picked my son up. The route that I would have travelled from Pitsea to Tol St Darcy includes the A130 from the Saddler's Farm roundabout to the East Hanningfield turnoff. I do not know exactly what time it was that I picked my son up, but I'm aware that I arrived home in Tol St Darcy at around 19:20 to 19:25 hours that evening. As I was travelling along the A130, I went through the Rettendon turnpike in the direction of Chelmsford. This is when you come through the Rettendon village and into a de-restricted road area. The road then goes into a series of bends on a decline in the road. Because I'm a regular user of this road, I'm aware that on these bends there is situated a farm shop and a gun club on the right hand side of the road. I am aware that there could be vehicles waiting to turn right. As I entered this decline, I became aware that the vehicles in front of me had slowed down. This would have been around 250 foot earlier than I would have anticipated stopping. I slowly caught up with the vehicles in front, but I had to brake quite heavily in the end because I had anticipated that any vehicle would be waiting to turn into the farm. I then stopped in the line of traffic, and I believe I was either 2 or 3 cars from the front of the line. I believe I was stationary for approximately 10 seconds when an oncoming vehicle left a gap for the vehicle that was turning right to cut across the traffic. As the vehicle did so, I could see it was a 4x4, and because of the shape of the rear of the vehicle and the grille over the rear lights, my immediate reaction was that it was a Range Rover. I believe that the vehicle was dark in colour, and I think it was possibly green. I don't know why, but I think there were at least 3 people inside the vehicle, possibly even 4. I was aware that the driver of the vehicle who was in the dark and a person who was sitting in the rear of the vehicle behind the driver's seat. This person, who I believe to be a man because of his size, appeared bigger than the driver. He was wearing a light fawn-coloured upper garment. As the vehicle started to turn, I got the impression that the person in the back looked over his shoulder in the direction of the Rettendon turnpike. The vehicle then went into a farm track that I did not know existed. I then continued my journey along the A130, and because I wasn't aware of the farm track, I looked down the track and could see the rear of the vehicle that had turned into the track. But I do not remember seeing the reflectors of any vehicles in front of it. I then continued on my journey home. I believe that the time this incident occurred would have been between 6:50 PM and 7 PM, because it normally takes me around 30 minutes to travel home from there. I don't believe I was more than 2 cars behind the Range Rover, so when it turned, I would have been no more than 30 foot from the vehicle. I had a clear and unobstructed view of the vehicle for a period of approximately 2 seconds whilst it crossed in front of me. Although the area of the road is not lit, there was lighting from the vehicles coming from the opposite direction. At the time I saw this, the traffic was quite heavy, especially traffic travelling towards Southend. I do wear glasses, but this is not necessary when driving. The man in the fawn-coloured garment in the rear of the vehicle appeared to be sat tight against the window and was even leaning with his right shoulder against this window. Okay, so if you needed any further evidence of a second Range Rover being involved in this case, then that is the most damning evidence of all. The reason I say that is because Tucker, Tate and Rolfe supposedly entered the lane at 6:44 p.m. This vehicle is seen between 6:50 and 7 p.m. entering that very same farm lane. The most interesting piece of information is regarding the description of the back of this Range Rover. We know that the blue Range Rover did not have any light guards or any grille around the rear lights. The man, who was no more than 30 feet away from the vehicle which turned into the lane around 7 p.m, was supposedly dark, potentially green in colour, and had light guards around the rear lights. This is clearly something which is stuck in this person's memory and something that he was able to recall when giving this eyewitness account. The next eyewitness describes seeing a white escort van pulling out of the lane at 7:50 p.m. This vehicle cut off the other road user and travelled at ridiculous speeds towards the Rettendon Turnpike. Let's now take a look at that following statement. The following statement is from Kevin Tarbuck. At around 7:40 p.m. on Wednesday the 6th of December 1995, I finished work and started my journey home. As I approached Rettendon along the A130, I had just passed White House Farm on the left-hand side, and I was approaching a small lane, again on the left-hand side. As I got nearer to the lane, a white Ford Escort van emerged from the lane and turned left towards Rettendon in front of me. I only saw that it had one male occupant, who was the driver. The reason I remember this is that pulling out in front of me had caused me to brake, and because it was icy and snowing, I thought what an idiot he was. The vehicle then accelerated away from me. I followed, but by the time I had reached Rettendon Turnpike roundabout, the van was nowhere to be seen. I would think that the van was either a D or E registration due to the style of the vehicle. I would not be able to identify the driver again. I would estimate that at the time this happened, it would have been around 7:50 p.m. At the time of the incident, it was dark and snowing. I had my windscreen wipers on and my headlights. In spite of these conditions, visibility was fairly good. There was no other vehicle immediately in front of me nor behind me. If the van had waited for me to pass, he could have pulled out without affecting anybody. The vehicle was in my sight for approximately 15 seconds, and the nearest I was to it was about 30 yards. Okay, so what is interesting about this statement is the fact that if we go all the way back to Darren Nichols' version of events, do you remember that he recalls pulling out in front of a vehicle, but he wasn't driving a van, he was driving an old Passat. Do you remember that he pulled out and someone beeped their horn at him and shook their fist at him because he was in supposedly a state of shock at this time? Now, if we think back to 1995, what is a common vehicle that an electrician would use? Someone who, did Darren Nichols' occupation, as it were. Darren Nichols, we know, was an electrician and also worked for BT over a certain period of time. Would a E-registration Ford white Escort van be the sort of vehicle that you would see an electrician drive? It's interesting. It's interesting because of the timeline. It's interesting because it matches up with Darren Nichols' version of events, but the cars have been switched. It's also interesting to note that there were no cars around at this time. It wasn't as if that this guy was trying to pull out, but because he knew he had to wait in some massive line of traffic. This person was urgently trying to get out of that lane. He obviously didn't take into account the road conditions or the person heading towards him. He basically cut him off and floored it towards the Rettendon Turnpike. Now, what reason could you give for this? It doesn't really make any sense. If this person was simply pulling out of that lane, he could have waited for the other car to pass and he would have had literally no obstruction. By pulling out in front of this car, it's almost as if he doesn't want to be seen. He wants to get out onto the road and pull away from this vehicle as soon as possible. If you would like to learn more about the Range Rover murders, then click on the video in front of you now. You will also see the Essex Boys playlist, which has all of the videos concerning this case in one convenient folder. Many thanks for joining me for this video. I look forward to seeing you all again for the next one. Take care. Cheers.